Policy Matters is a conversation platform which aims to provide reasoned analysis and context to the activities, reforms, and policies of the federal government of Ethiopia. Exploring various reforms the government is undertaking, the conversation platform aspires to enable nuanced and informed understanding.
Welcome to Policy Matters. We are here today with Dr. Brook Taye, Senior Advisor of the Ministry of Finance. We will be continuing the discussion on telecom market reform in Ethiopia. Well, Dr. Brook, thank you so much for this exciting conversation. I know many in Ethiopia and also outside the country are quite keen to stay abreast of developments in the telecom sector. Before we get started, I'd like to frame today's conversation in two segments. The first is where we are now and today, and the second part is where we are going. So on the first component, where we are now, back in 2018, there was a drafting of a communication services proclamation. And in April of 2021 of this year, the ECA confirms two technical bids from bidders about the telecom licenses, two full new service telecom licenses. A month later, around May, the ECA confirms and awards the license to a global partnership consisting of 6 stakeholders with an investment valuing over 8 billion over a 10-year period. Congratulations. And then in June of this year, just this past few days, your team partook in a signing ceremony to mark the historic milestone. Can you tell us the significance of this moment and the process that led us to this point?
Thanks so much, Lamia. This is obviously a watershed moment in terms of our economic growth strategy in Ethiopia. As you know, for over 120 years, the telecommunications sector was a closed market. It was not open for competition. In 2018, the government made a decision to open up the sector for competition. In order to do that, there were several policy decisions that needed to be made in terms of how many operators will join the marketplace, the future of the incumbent in terms of does it continue fully owned by the government, or there would be some sort of a privatization process. So after exhaustively studying the different aspects of it, obviously the Communication Services Proclamation was enacted. And once that was done, obviously the process was very exhaustive to a point where you have over 20 different stakeholders in the government branches, agencies, reviewing every lines of the proclamation to make sure that it does not unnecessarily disadvantage them. But the most important element of the proclamation, captured in Article 19 is the proclamation permits domestic and foreign participants, investors, to take part in the Ethiopian communication sector independently without any joint venture with the government. So once the proclamation was enacted, the next phase of the work was establishing Ethiopian Communications Authority from the ground up. This started with really establishing the institution independently to make sure that it's accountable to the Prime Minister's office, but at the same time have independent board members, have a tribunal to hear any grievance between market operators among themselves, but also, most importantly, the public when it comes to communication services. And ECA, through its young and very short lifespan, was successfully drafted over 18 different directives. This pertains to land usage, quality of service, and many different components that one would need to have a very robust regulatory environment that would allow competition, but at the same time protect the interest of the consumers. And I think if you look at the the regulation that was drafted, the Universal Access Fund regulation by ECA, it is also addresses the coverage requirement and the coverage commitment of the speeders, not only just imposing coverage requirement, but also facilitating a fund structure to make sure that if in areas where, because of the fact that that given area is not economically attractive for operators, for both the incumbent and the newcomers, and if there is a gap in terms of financing, this Universal Access Fund will be utilized. For example, if, in Samara and Afar, if the operators feels that 4G services or fiber optics, deploying fiber optics is not profitable because their businesses, they need to make profit, and they think that there needs to be some sort of funding that needs to match that gap. The government already committed itself with the World Bank under the Digital Foundation Fund to spend over $100 million on infrastructure development. But at the same time, there will be the revenue of these operators will be collected under this fund and administered by ECA, and to make sure that services everywhere in Ethiopia are equivalent, as efficient and optimal. So there's been significant amount of work in this process. But for us, the most satisfying thing, among obviously the upfront fee of $850 million and the investment of over $8 billion the next 10 years, is the fact that the process was transparent. This was attested by the winning bidder and also the losing bidder on many different public outlets, that the process was transparent, inclusive, and that we've provided, through a stakeholder consultation, but also through different mediums to make sure that everybody's on the same equal footing when it comes to this process. And we were justified with the fact that we have this amazing result with the award of the license.
Great, and it sounds like quite an exhaustive and thorough process. So again, congratulations to you and the Ethiopian Communications Authority under Engineer Balchareba. Now, the bid, as I mentioned, is over $8 billion over a decade. And it reflects the highest FDI investment to Ethiopia. What really stood out from the bid that was submitted by the Global Partnership?
Yeah, so there obviously in their investment strategy, there are many different things included that were equally the most important. For example, they would start the services with 4G. So literally the day that the Global Partnership for Ethiopia starts providing telecommunication services in Ethiopia, it would be a 4G service. And immediately after, especially in urban areas, they will provide 5G services. And they've also committed by 2023, they will have a low orbital satellite that will cover the entire territory of Ethiopia with 4G services. And of course, the $8.5 billion investment. But for me, the one thing that stands out is the fact that this process will create over 1 million, from 1 million to 1.5 million new jobs. As you know, we're in Ethiopia, we have 70% of our population is under the age of 30. And out of that 70%, significant number of of our population is looking for a job. They go to school, get education, and graduate, but still looking for a job. And for me, I always argue with colleagues and others in terms of policy discussion that you allow a young entrepreneurial Ethiopian with a fast internet connection, a laptop. That means you immediately allow them to join the global workforce. They're no longer looking for a job in Ethiopia, but they will be competing for jobs over every corner of the world. And I have a firm belief that our entrepreneurial skill set in Ethiopia would allow us to take significant amount of the market share in terms of service export. So not only this would create directly the millions of jobs that's committed, but also the large number of unemployed youth, entrepreneurial but unemployed youth the communication services opening up and the introduction of the consortium with companies like Vodafone, Vodacom, Safaricom, CDC Group, and Sumitomo, collectively the telecom operators covering many different countries and providing services to over 1 billion subscribers is significant. So for me, what stood out is the new job opportunities that will result as a result of the introduction of this company into Ethiopian market.
Great, and that's really helpful and quite exciting. I think sometimes when people think FDI, they think a lot of the revenue and the opportunities will be leaving the country. But now we have both, as you mentioned, jobs in terms of employment, but also new local entrepreneurship opportunities for those who are set to be the employers of the digital economy. So any sense of kind of the sectors that will benefit or will be as part of these new jobs?
So obviously the telecommunication sector is an accelerator. ICT is an accelerator. It makes your job optimal. The way you do things becomes optimal. Optimality in the economic sphere is you'll be able to reduce cost, you'll be able to address your customers and really have more coverage when it comes to anything that you do. Let's take, for example, in education. If we manage to connect all our high schools and primary schools and universities with fast internet connection, imagine the access to knowledge that they will be able to have. No need to queue up and at JFK library at Skilo and fighting it over for one book because there's only one version of it or one piece of it left in that library, but you'll be able to log in and be able to download books and articles and really educate yourself to the most current thinking in your specific field of study. In agriculture, you'll be able to optimize farming, you'll be able to monitor agro-climate activities and provide that data to farmers and distribute fertilizer efficiently by identifying the soil types, reviewing that soil types and then correcting it and adjusting it based on the data that's available. And in tourism sector, which we have not fully taken advantage, the way to attract tourists to come to Ethiopia is to make sure that you promote your country, and through the internet medium, you'll be able to get into everybody's pocket everywhere else in the world and really send them a push notification to understand that there is an opportunity in Ethiopia to come and visit. So, overall in manufacturing and ICT sector, this is the enabler. This is the enabler. And then the next phase of our growth miracle in Ethiopia, I'm sure will be written as a result of the digitization of the country.
Great. So it's really an enabler to the digital economy, and it's sector agnostic, which is quite exciting. Now, we've also learned that the sale of the second telecom license will be postponed and re-auctioned in the coming months. Can you help us understand what drove that decision? And in your response, maybe also touch on the announcements around infrastructure and mobile money deployments.
Absolutely. So the decision of the Cabinet Councils of Ministers was to award only one license to the global consortium and to suspend the second license issuance and re-tender the second license. And I think the decision was very easy, so to speak, because if we look at the financial offer submitted by the winning bidder and the second bidder was, the difference is in the magnitude of $250 million. So we think that the losing bidder undervalued this opportunity, because the market is telling you that a consortium of many different companies collectively think that this opportunity worth $850 million versus another company is telling you it's actually below that. The decision was very easy. But of course, the policy review that we've done indicates that Ethiopia is a three operator market for the time being, at least for 15 years, the licensing period. For 10 years would be the exclusivity period, but 15 years for the licensing period. So the decision is to issue the second license again with some policy adjustment that needs to be made to make sure that the opportunity continues to be attractive. So these policy revisions are the ones that you've mentioned. For example, on mobile financial services, His Excellency the Prime Minister has already announced that within a year, the mobile financial services will be opened for operators that are coming in and joining the communication services sector. So that will be reflected in the RFP in some form. Obviously, the mandate of issuing MFS licenses or mobile financial services licenses is with the National Bank of Ethiopia, the central bank. So the central bank needs to or will eventually would come up with a way to make sure that the RFP is in line with their internal directive and necessary legal instruments. But when it comes to towers and third-party tower companies, obviously, that is something that the government has already made a decision to not to issue this license. But at this point in time, we're looking at all the different policy elements that would have been included but left out from the RFP process. And obviously, it's a dynamic process, as you know. So we'll go through it, and then decision makers have to make a tough decision as to how to restructure the RFP. And then, based on their decision, we'll be able to issue it very soon.
Great. And any expected timeline on when the RFP will be reissued?
So we're working under the time frame of 3 to 6 months. Obviously, in between, there are many things that we need to finalize with the partial privatization process of Ethio Telecom. And then once that's the documents and the transaction elements is completed, then we will float it, because we need to have a separate process, not to confuse the market, but also take advantage of companies who have not succeeded in one would be able to participate in the other.
Great. And so this is a good segue to my next question. In parallel to the market liberalization process, there's also a privatization process underway with the incumbent. So we know that there is an expected 40% sale, 5% will be a floating stock reserved for Ethiopian nationals, and the remaining 55% will be a controlling stock for the government of Ethiopia. Can you give us any update on the process for the privatization process?
Absolutely. We're at the stage where several due diligence have been completed, legal due diligence, tax and financial due diligence have been completed in terms of the company, and we've hired Deloitte to consult on the transaction advisory side. On the seller side, the Public Enterprise and Holding Administration Agencies is running the activity on the technical level, but there is also a steering committee composed of Ministry of Finance, Ethio Telecom, the Public Enterprise Holding and Administration Agency, and others, to make sure that the process is efficient, transparent, and at this moment, the decision has been made to issue the expression of interest very soon, the next few weeks, and that would, permit the transaction team to understand or to know the universe of investors that are interested in participating in this process, based on those lists of participants, which obviously would be public, and to make sure that everybody knows who's interested in this process. The RFP process would commence, but overall, we've learned a lot from the two license issuance process, and in partial privatization, even though it's different, you're divesting a holding of a company versus issuing 2 new licenses, but at least we understand the different dynamics and the kind of the areas where we need to be very cautious, and in areas where we need to be more bullish and kind of go at it in full speed. So I don't think it would take several months, but we'll take our time to make sure that it's done efficiently and properly, but most importantly, it's done transparently.
Great. And to give Ethiopians a sense of what that 5% can mean for them, can you help us unpack what the floating stock implies? So
the government's decision was to have 5% of Ethio Telecom share to be designated for Ethiopians, and 40% will be the one that will be partially as part of the partial privatization process, which will be open for anybody who would meet the technical and financial requirement of the RFP. And as you said, 55% would remain with the public, would remain with the government on behalf of the public, of course. And so that 5% would be something that the entire structure of the 5%, how many stocks will be inside that 5%? Would it be floated in the new capital market that will be established? Or is it going to be owned by, one company, and that company as a controlling owner of that 5% will be able to subsequently offer its stock? All of that is under the work. So obviously when we do the entire communication services reform work, we take our time, but we get into the granular level and understand each element of it. So it's in the process, and the initial aspect of it would be the 40%. Once that's completed, we'll get into the 5% related matter, and of course we'll have a consultative process. It's very inclusive and participatory to make sure that everybody would have their opinion and say in the entire process, and it would be something that will be reviewed by the macro team, the Privatization Advisory Council, and we'll be able to communicate further when the government makes a decision as to the entire structure of it.
So obviously, there's going to be quite an evolution that will take place even for the incumbent. And this essentially can help me transition to the second and last segment of this conversation around mobile financial services. So in May of this year, quite recently, Ethio Telecom introduced its mobile money service, Telecom. Within its first 3 weeks, it already surpassed the 3 million mark of customers. Ethio Telecom also has approximately 53 million subscribers and 25 million data and internet users. How do you think the partial privatization of Ethio Telecom will impact its mobile money business?
So it actually would support the Ethio Telecom strategy to continue holding its market share, and if not expand it, and really become a regional player by kind of transforming its services and introducing new and innovative components that needs to be availed in Ethiopia to make sure that the standard is set at the highest level, to make sure that government services are efficient, and people who are utilizing Ethio Telecom service will get the maximum or the best of services. So with the introduction of the mobile financial services, I think what it would do is it would reduce the digital gap that you have, or the financial inclusion gap that you have right now, by making sure that now all you need to have is a mobile phone and Telebir, and you'll have access to a banking structure somehow to pay, to deposit, and to transfer. And then that this would be significant, especially people who live in in an area where you don't have 6-7 different branches of banks all around you, and it's also safety when you don't have to travel with significant amount of cash from one town to another. You just need to carry your mobile, and you'll be able to execute payments. So it would allow Ethio Telecom to achieve its commitment to make sure that there's efficient and excellent service, and again, it would reduce the unbanked society of Ethiopia, and with the permission to allow the other 2 operators in the mobile financial services as well, which would mean is competition and better service, efficient service.
And that's exactly it. So the last figures we have from Findex in 2017 shows Sub-Saharan Africa has a regional penetration of 21% for mobile money, while Ethiopia was at 0.3%. And so, it's 2021. We have Telebir today. A year from now, a mobile money service from the Global Partnership, and likely a third MNO. And we also have the postal services interested in mobile financial services, along with existing players like Mbir, Belcash, etc. What do you think is the North Star for digital payments also when considering that the government has piloted initiatives like G2P payments for the Protective Safety Net program with some of the existing providers. How do we want the government, MNOs, other providers to really drive mobile money adoption in the future?
Yeah, so it goes back to the initial discussion that we had. The introduction of opening up the sector to more competition is as in agreeing that that's the enabler. The rest is up to the private sector. The rest is up to people who are expert at the sector to make sure that they utilize the services and to deliver on the government's commitment under its digital 2025 strategy to digitize the country, to make sure that on areas where we were left out as a country, we were left out compared to our regional peers. We need to leapfrog and try to be as close as possible to the next technological advancement as much as possible. So the North Star is for the government to continue to open up the sectors that would allow further economic growth, and allow the entrepreneurial spirit of the youth is fully captured in a formal sense, whereby they will be able to generate revenue for themselves, but also for the government through tax, and be able to establish a livelihood in Ethiopia that is commiserate of their talent. And that's the North Star. So to make sure for us, our job is to make sure that we're the enablers, to make sure that we enable the different sectors and to allow them through mobile financial services or different type of telecom related services, because the universe is so big in terms of the technological aspect of it. So the aim is to continue to build on this and to develop further policy documents and policy thinking that would permit the entrepreneurial spirit would continue, and the government does not become an impediment, but becomes an enabler to make sure that supporting the vast number of people who really wanted to make sure that they do entrepreneurial activities in Ethiopia.
Well, this is really great. We know that 35% of Ethiopia's population has access to a financial institution or an account at a financial institution. With everything that you've shared today, I'm quite confident that this number is going to be very different for the next Findex that comes out. So again, congratulations to you and your team. And we are looking forward to staying abreast of all the developments in both the public and private sector going forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.